Corruption is paid by the poor. End quote. Who said that? Well, you may be surprised to learn that's what Pope Francis said in a morning mass in the Vatican back in 2014. Of course, while the Pope continues to recover in hospital abroad, here in Mzansi, we're still grappling to shake off corruption's hold. In this edition of The Lead, we speak to two of our top investigative journalists who've unearthed dodgy procurement contracts at both Johannesburg City Power and the Passenger Rail Agency. Later, we'll touch on the latest budget speech negotiations and end off with how King Charles III got his apparent groove. All this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. The power utility responsible for keeping the city of Johannesburg's lights on is hemorrhaging money. Yet City Power's been dishing out millions for contractor work not completed by a set deadline. News 24's revealed how company Slide Exhibits had bagged 12 million rand to install public lighting in the metro. That's despite breaking municipal finance laws in the process. ANC-connected businessman Tato Moseme leads this company, and all this while City Power had lost around 2.8 billion, not million, billion rand in the past financial year. Now for more, our investigative reporter Khaya Koko joins us now from our Johannesburg studios. Khaya, how are you doing?
Good yourself, Graeme.
Yeah, can't complain. Okay, take us from the beginning. How did you uncover this story?
Well, we've been looking at City Power for the last little while, owing to many reasons. Chief among them is the dark city that we now live in. Always tripping, always unscheduled blackouts. And so you want to look at the management and what causes all of these things, despite what City Power tells us in public statements. So we then came across this Auditor General report, which also detailed about 4.9 billion rand in irregular expenditure. A lack of controls was cited for the financial mismanagement and bad governance within City Power. And then this contract emerged where we found information that there were employees, still good employees within the power utility owned by the city of Johannesburg who tried to stop this 12 million rand payment and try to enforce some controls, but were, the evidence showed, blocked by senior management, who then processed the payment and got it paid. So that is an example of what the Auditor General found was a lack of financial controls that goes on at the entity.
Sure, but I think it's also sort of fair to also point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, Khaya, but the work was eventually done. It just wasn't done by the sort of deadline, which is a problem within itself. Yet, in the interim, Moseme still got the 12 million rand, right? Who's he close to?
Well, he is the younger brother of a gentleman by the name of Ben Moseme. Ben Moseme is a known Free State ANC benefactor who's done work for the ANC in that province, including for its 110th anniversary, year anniversary in 2022, January of 2022. He, Mr. Ben Moseme, has also donated a big tent to the Gauteng provincial government during the COVID pandemic at the start of it, to house homeless people within the province. So there's a lot of connections, political connections there, and the allegations are that those connections were the reason why treasury regulations that govern or regulate the municipal finance management and the public finance management and in other procurement policies and legislation, why those were circumvented in order to pay the gentleman. We, yes, as you said, eventually did it, but like 5 months after it was supposed to be done, and after a lot of pressure that was applied by the junior employees.
Why do you think then, Khaya, that the 12 million rand was sort of given up front, if you will? Why did that sort of come up front? Notwithstanding the obvious political connections, but was this like a favor? What was this?
Well, it's part of a what was highlighted by the AG as a bigger example of how a supply chain gets done with City Power. It's the start of a bigger story, Graeme, a series. More will follow on it to show other examples of spending spending irregularities that we will be uncovering over the next few weeks or so. So it's not just this contract that alleged irregularities occurred, but others as well. And sort of a bigger story is how this entity is being managed, and to the disadvantage of Johannesburg residents.
I mean, and all the while, I've covered city power stories myself up in Johannesburg. I remember being sort of taken behind the scenes once upon a time during the pandemic, and I remember seeing some of the infrastructure, Khaya, and it's like some of the infrastructure is like 100 years old. That's an antique, City power yet is dealing with all of that and all the outages that happen because of that, and yet we're seeing from the AG's report that 2.8 billion rand is just being lost into the ether. Give me a sense of people on the ground, perhaps you've been speaking to over the longest time. I mean, there is a growing sense of frustration beyond just Eskom's load shedding, right?
Of course there is. Johannesburg residents, I mean, you go on social media at any given time of any given day and you will find a lot of complaints. What's interesting is that City Power itself is admitting that last week we had, I think it was on the 6th of March, we had a big storm, a thunderstorm here in Johannesburg that flooded quite a few streets, especially in the northern parts of the city. And the infrastructure did not hold up. Power stations blew up and there was, again, more blackouts. And City Power itself says it's because of its aging infrastructure. And yet, as you rightly contend, Graeme, there's a lot of money that goes towards City Power and a lot of investment of ratepayers' money and taxpayers' money into trying to resolve the infrastructure backlog that the entity has, and yet nothing seems to be happening. It seems to be keep getting worse. News 24 also did a lovely story that showed how the mayor of Johannesburg, Dada Morero, as he travels from his Rudderport home in the west to his offices in the CBD, 12 intersections are without functioning traffic lights. So there's a lot of ailing infrastructure within the city of Johannesburg, and
of course, Khaya, the president as well, if I may just add in this point, the president as well coming out in a big way and saying he's shocked again or surprised. He didn't use the word shocked, but of course we know the meme that follows the president when he finally finds out about things. It's like, hey, it's been there the whole time. Joburg's infrastructure has been crumbling.
And he's a resident of Johannesburg, the president. He's got
there
homes
you go.
in the city, so I wonder how he travels. Maybe the tinted windows, you can't even see outside. We know we can't see inside sometimes, but maybe he also can't see when he's chauffeured around the city. But those of us who do live and work in the city will tell you that, it's not bearable to live in.
Finally, Khaya, just what is City Power saying? I mean, Isaac Mangena, he's always a busy guy, the spokesperson for the utility. What was the spin, if you will? What was the statement that you got in regards to your reportage here?
So the first one would be that the public lighting contract was done through a competitive tender process, and the right person for the job, according to them, was appointed. They're happy that the project was finally done, but they do concede that there are procurement irregularities with certain contracts. They don't name them. Apparently there's an external independent investigation that has been commissioned by the executive management at City Power, the preliminary results of which, according to Isaac McKenna, the spokesperson, would be released, and I quote here, in the coming days. So there's a lot of that saying that things are being probed. On the AG report, there's again acknowledgement that yes, the AG did find 2.8 billion losses, lack of controls, but they're trying to put a spin to it to say, listen, this is historical and we are fixing it. The residents should start seeing improvements soon going into the following financial years. So, but I mean, as you would know, we've heard all of these things before in the past, and things aren't getting better. In fact, painfully, they're getting worse.
Yeah, it really sounds like there's a black hole there at City Power, for no pun intended, with all this money just going there. I mean, what can we expect from your reportage very quickly, Khaya? In a nutshell, what can we expect over the coming weeks and months?
More revelations in we called it power connections. So we'll be revealing more in terms of also how lack of maintenance, and how the maintenance budget was not used properly. So that should come up. Readers should look out for that one. Try and make sense of why we are in the quagmire that we're in.
Fantastic. Khaya, we've reached that part of the show on the lead here on News 24 where we get to enjoy a chappy. We can open it that side. You can choose whichever did you know fact that you like that you want to read from there.
Yeah.
Shame,
I haven't
Sipho,
read one of these in a minute, so let's see
which flavor did you take?
I think it's a pink one. I think it's strawberry. I'm not sure what it is.
Sure, nice, bro. Okay, tell us what your fact is, man.
Okay. Did you know because metal expands when it's heated, the Eiffel Tower is 7 centimeters taller in summer than it is in winter?
Sure.
So, for all those who are planning to travel to Paris, France, you'll see that you will probably notice that 7 centimeter difference in the Eiffel Tower when it's hot rather than when it's cold.
I wonder if it was only shifting just because the Springboks won there. But anyway, did you know your left lung? Sorry, this print is a little bit small. Did you know your left lung is smaller than your right lung to make room for your heart? Sure.
Okay, that's a
didn't know
decent.
that, man.
Did you know? They keep churning them out. Hey, I haven't read this since I was a kid, probably. I'm not really a Chappie fan.
Which sweetie do you normally like? Which sweetie do you normally like?
When I was growing up, Halls, probably, because I've got a very scratchy throat, so it always helps.
Oh, it sounds like you've got a voice for radio there, Khaya.
No, a face for it, maybe.
Well, I'm looking forward to having you on the show again. I really appreciate your time. That's Khaya Koko, our one of our investigative reporters. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll chat again soon.
Thanks, Graeme. Cheers.
As the passenger rail agency attempts to resuscitate our country's train lines, News 24's uncovered evidence that Prasa awarded one contractor 2 massive multi-billion rand tenders without meeting a series of critical minimum requirements. Last year, Prasa had signed contracts with at least 2 listed companies to upgrade the rail network's train signalling equipment, yet they didn't even own bank accounts, and both are in fact the same entity. What? Well, to take us deeper into this News 24 exclusive, we're joined now by our senior investigative reporter, Sipho Masondo. Sipho, Unjani, I hope you're having a fantastic day thus far. How are you doing?
Not too bad. I can't complain. The weather is beautiful up here in Johannesburg. It's not hot.
Fantastic. Okay, this is quite an in-depth piece that you put together for the team. Without revealing your sources, Sipho, how did you come about the scoop?
I came about the scoop sometime, not last week, the previous week, from a source of mine at Prasa. I had met him for other things. We sat down, we're having a conversation, and we're chatting about a separate story, something very, very different from this. And then as we were chatting, the guy says to me, by the way, what we're chatting about now is just really peanuts. We were chatting about a different tender, obviously. And then he says to me, what we're talking about now is peanuts. There is a very big story at Prasa. Prasa has awarded a massive tenders for train signaling equipment to the value of about 18 billion, and the companies that were appointed, it would appear, did not meet the requirements. So basically, that's how the story came to me about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. And then, because it required quite a lot of reading, the source gave me lots and lots of documents to read. So I spent basically the better part of last week reading all the documents, and eventually I was able to put up a story together for this past Saturday on News 24.
Sure, and well done, Sipho, because it is very comprehensive. You've done some fantastic work. Tell us about these companies implicated here. How and why did they manage to land these contracts?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Graeme, as to why they were able to bag this contract. I mean, your guess is as good as mine. but the owner of the two companies, in fact, because what happened here is that the same company was awarded two contracts, Graeme. So as per our story, in May of 2023, as well as July of 2023, Prasa decided to award these two contracts to this one company. So the company, the name of the company is called, the name of the company that got the first contract, which was awarded in May 2023, is called the Maka Joint Venture. But the parties to the joint venture are three companies. So there's Maka Joint Venture that got the first contract, the 5.5 billion contract in May 2023. The structure of the Maka joint venture is the parties to the joint venture are three companies known as Maziya General Services, China Railway International Group, as well as China Railway Wuhan Electrification Group. So these are the parties to the contract that was awarded in May 2023. But 2 months down the line, after awarding a contract for 5.5 billion to Maka joint venture, in July of 2023, Prasa went ahead and awarded another contract for 11.5 billion to exactly the same company, but it had a different name now. The name now was known as the Krieg Maziya Joint Venture. But if you look at the structure of the Krieg Maziya Joint Venture, you quickly realize, Graeme, that it's exactly the same company that was awarded the other tender for 5.5 billion 2 months prior. The structure of the Krieg Maziya Joint Venture is made up of the following companies: Maziya General Services, China Railway International Group, as well as the China Railway Wuhan Electrification Group. So it's basically the same company that got the previous tender 2 months prior, but just under a different guise or a different name.
And so this is ultimately one company, with this apparent China connection, and they essentially failed to meet a whole series of critical minimum requirements. Take me through those, please, Sipho.
So I think one of the key requirements that was necessary here, Graeme, was that in construction, there's something that is called a bid bond. So these, in very, very major infrastructure constructions projects, a bid bond basically is a financial guarantee that the person that is getting the tender issues to the project owner. And it's basically a financial guarantee to say that the person that is getting the tender will be able to deliver according to contractual obligations. So what normally happens in industry is that if a tender is worth 100 million, then the guy that is being awarded the tender has to have a financial guarantee of 100 million. And this basically is just a process that is put in place to make sure that the person that is getting the tender is going to be able to deliver. And if he's not able to deliver, then the project owner can actually claim financial compensation from the guy that got the tender. So in this case, both the Maka joint venture as well as the Krieg Maziya joint ventures, they were supposed to raise bid bonds. For the first contract, it would have been 10% of 5.5 billion. I don't know what that is. And then for the second contract, it would have been another 10% for 11.5 billion. I also don't know that. I also don't know what that is. But what is very critical here, Graeme, is that it appears from the documents that we've obtained that from both contracts, the Maka joint venture was not able to raise a bid bond of 10%. That would have been 10% of 5.5 billion. And again, the Krieg Maziya joint venture failed to raise a bid bond that would have been 10% of the 11.5 billion. That is for the second contract. So that is just one of a series of requirements that these companies were not able to meet. Another key one was that these joint ventures, both of them individually as companies parties to the joint venture, all these companies were supposed to be registered on the CSD. That's the Central Supplier Database base that is run by Treasury. They were supposed to have a bank account. They were supposed to be registered on the CSD, have a bank account, and be tax compliant. And it turned out that one of the partners to both joint ventures, which is the China Railway Wahun Electrification Group. They were not tax compliant. They did not have tax certificates issued by SARS. They did not have a bank account. They were not registered on the CSD. So these, what this actually means effectively is that since one of the parties to both joint ventures was not tax compliant and it did not have a bank account, it actually essentially means that both joint ventures did not qualify, they did not meet the criteria, and they were not supposed to be awarded these contracts.
Sure, not even having any bank accounts, Sipho. Okay, so the Hawks are investigating. It's not as if there isn't an official investigation sort of underway at the moment. What have the Hawks told you, and where's that investigation at this point?
According to what was reported by our sister publication about 2 weeks ago, the Hawks are actually investigating. That is really what we know. The Hawks, Graeme, they do not comment. They don't give a blow-to-blow account of how the investigation is unfolding. So what we do know is that they are investigating. But how far that investigation is, how long it will take, your guess is as good as mine.
Sure. And then in the meantime, Masondo General Services, which is this main sort of company at the center of all of this, Sipho, they've been roped in for other major government contracts in the past, or they've been sort of tipped as being the main ones. Tell me about one or two of those particular projects. We're not talking about small and yana things. We're talking about big tenders here, right?
They are definitely not small and yana contracts, Graeme, I can tell you that much. So one particular contract that comes to mind is, I think it must have been, you remember Parliament was gutted by a fire. I think it must have been early 2022. So, and then obviously after that accident, then they had to start a process to rebuild the building. But before the construction could begin, they had to demolish it it was a very sensitive project. Basically, they had to demolish it, not demolish everything, just demolish it in a way so that they're able to begin reconstructing the areas that were gutted by the fire. So this contract was awarded to Masondo General Services. I can't remember the rand value, Graeme, but I seem to recall that, if my memory serves me well, that contract is worth at the very least R1 billion. And
sure,
that's not the only contract that we know that Masondo General Services has received from the state. Some time ago, about 15 years ago, they were involved in the construction of the Jabu Mlangani Hospital in Jabulani. I think about that project was supposed to cost about 333 million, and eventually, when the project was finished, they had spent at least R1 billion. And I can't really say, to be fair to Masondo General Services, they were not the only contractor involved in that project. So that R1 billion did not accrue to Masondo General Services only. There are other companies that were involved, but we have to add that Masondo General Services was involved in that project.
Sure, there's a lot of different moving parts here. Just to end off, Sipho, in terms of the refurbishment of the train signaling devices and the equipment that allows our very busy lines to operate. For example, here in Cape Town, the Central Line it's responsible for around 250,000 South Africans to get into the city centre to work every day. So that equipment would be very critical in ensuring all lines are open again, which Prasa is wanting to do. Do you know finally if whether or not this work is still going to continue, that the train signaling equipment will be installed or refurbished? And by which deadline? Do you know if that process sort of continues?
What we do know, Graeme, is that the train signaling equipment has to be installed, and it's very critical. It's equipment that's quite very important in the proper functioning of a rail network. You can't function without train signaling equipment. That's why if you don't have a train signaling equipment, it means basically that trains can actually collide with each other, and they can, out of the blue, while it's running, and then just get off the rails. and so there's just a lot of problems that can come about as a result of not having proper train signaling equipment. So what we do know is that the equipment has to be installed. Whether or not Mazia will be the company that will eventually install the signal equipment, we don't know. Prasa told us last week that they will launch an investigation into the awarding of these contracts, but as of now,
another investigation.
Yeah, you know how these things go in this country, Graeme. Once there's an allegation of corruption, then a government department or a government entity like Prasa will appoint a company to do an investigation. It will take a long time, and by the time the investigation is completed, it will be 2-3 years down the line, and I don't know what will happen afterwards, because if investigation is done after 3 or 4 years, Prasa, I don't know if they will stop the contract. They will stop Mazia from installing the equipment, but it will probably be pointless, because maybe by the time the investigation is completed, maybe Mazia General Services and its 2 Chinese partners would have finished installing the equipment.
Well, thank you so much for your story today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Graeme.
Time for our trending topic now, and it's budget week, so expect rolling coverage here on News 24. The presidency says the expectation remains high for Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana to deliver his much-anticipated speech this Wednesday. It, of course, follows the unprecedented push within the Government of National Unity to rail against a proposed 2% VAT increase. Well, we've since revealed, as of Monday morning, that the DA and ANC had yet to reach an agreement on the fiscal framework. Presidency spokesperson Vincent Magwenya says budget deliberations continued well over the weekend, with President Cyril Ramaphosa expected to meet DA leader John Steenhuisen sometime before the budget's finalized. It's understood for now, though, that a VAT increase of sorts is still on the cards. Keep it here on The Lead on News 24 for our budget deconstruct later in the week. And finally, this is just one of the tracks King Charles III says is almost certain to get him grooving on the dance floor. Yes, that's right, the UK monarch says Kylie Minogue's hit and Diana Ross's Upside Down are among his personal favourites to be included in the King's music room. He's teamed up with Apple to launch this brand new radio show. Miriam Makeba's The Click song has also made the King's list of top Commonwealth tunes. Among the other artists included on the Royals playlist are Bob Marley, Beyonce and Nigeria's Davido. The show marks Commonwealth Day, the block of nations which the apartheid government had left back in 1961 before democratic South Africa rejoined in 1994, some 33 years later. And that's our show. If you'd like to get more involved with The Lead on News 24, you can drop your suggestions and your voice notes. Yes, they're welcome. We'd like to hear from you on tips@24.com. That's the email address you can send us anything on top of your mind. That's tips@24.com to get included right here on The Lead on News 24.